Ever feel like you're doing the same types of things as the multiple millionaires in the fitness space, yet you're not seeing the same type of results? Or how about why does it feel like the success is reserved for the few and somehow you're not in there? Well, in today's video, we're discussing what separates the people who struggle from the people who become millionaires and how you can do the same. You ready? Let's get started. What's up, Coach? I'm Beverley Simpson. I am the owner of PT Profit Formula. So welcome to my channel. If this is your first time around here, please be sure to hit subscribe, tap that bell to be notified when the next latest and greatest video comes out. And if you get a lot of value today, please be sure to hit that like button. Today, I'm sitting down with multiple millionaire business owner, Jen Casey, who is the host of the CEO Psyche podcast, a personal friend and an amazing mentor as I'm in her podcast. And you are going to hear today really what separates the people who continue to struggle and never get to make it to that 7-figure business owner level versus the people who seem to have it all and how you can cross those barriers by the end of this video. So let's go ahead and roll that interview. Jen, I'm so excited to have you on the show today. Thank you so much for coming to hang out with me.
Oh my God, today is going to be so fun. I feel it. I feel it in my bones.
Me too. It's so funny. Right before we hit record, we were talking about how we're both super awkward, right? As we're going to hit record, even though literally I get the pleasure and the privilege to talk to Jen every single day. And then now we're doing this formal podcast and it's like, awkward Beverly.
Whenever I hit record on anything, if it's not live, I don't know what comes over me, but it's like I forget how to form sentences. I forget how to like I'm like studied actor. I should be able to do this thing, but it just I don't know. My brain just goes into like total brain fart. Yeah.
Like performance mode. All right. So for those of you who do not know awesome Hey Jen Casey, I'd love for you to just share a little bit about who you are, how you got started, and who you serve.
Yeah. So I call myself a brain-based business coach, and I work with online coaches and course creators in a couple of different ways, but mainly to really help them rewire their subconscious programming, as well as step into a space where they are creating sales content and course content that feels really aligned to them and is driven by psychology and really informed in an integrity-based way. But I actually got my start in the fitness and health world, just like many peeps. And yeah, 2011.
Wow. What year are we in? 10 years.
10 years, yeah.
So 10 years in the online space?
Yeah, I got my first taste of it in the network marketing space. And I wasn't trying, like, I didn't necessarily want to be an entrepreneur. And I didn't realize that I was on a path to build a business. I just saw so many of my actor friends struggling, many of them on Broadway 1 minute and then back behind a bar the next minute. And I did not want to work in a restaurant for the rest of my life. And I really wanted to pursue a career in theater. And I said, okay, what else can I do to supplement that income so that I'm not having to constantly, try to like get shifts covered and do this whole like stressful dance of like begging people to take my shift so I can go to the audition that will be the audition. Like I just didn't want that energy in my life. And so I randomly signed up with a network marketing health and fitness company, and literally my life has never been the same.
I love it. I love it. Okay. So I asked Jen to come and hang out with us today because one of the things that just keeps coming up, it's so prevalent in the fitness space specifically, no matter where you are and what level you're at, is that we are always combating the preconceived notions of essentially money and money mindset and what is affordable, what's valuable, how do you measure your worth? And also right before we hit record, we were talking about, or not necessarily measure your worth. Let me just cancel that and rephrase that because it's not the same, but measure the value of your offer. And also we were talking about, why is it that so many people who have the same amount of time in a day, why does it seem like only the success is reserved for the few? So that's what we're going to be diving in today. And we're going to be talking a lot about the invisible components to what it takes to be a successful business owner. And successful, compared to what you get to decide what success means, but success for you. So I'd love for you to just dive in. Tell us things.
So I love this conversation around money mindset and really what it takes to shift your money mindset. I think that's a big key term, good marketing term that a lot of people get excited about. But what does that actually mean? And I think in the fitness space, it's really quite unique, because when I was with a network marketing company, I was with Beachbody, we would make a $30 to $50 commission and essentially be expected to coach somebody for life. And then if they bought recurring products, then we would make another couple bucks. But the money mindset in that industry was quite challenging, because after I left, I started coaching a lot of people in that space, and they had one of the biggest challenges with actually charging for their time. And I also was a fitness instructor. I taught 4 classes a week, and I thought, this is the best thing ever. I'm getting paid $30 to work out. Hell yeah. Like, not calculating how much time it took for me to prep the classes and learn the choreography and do all of and drive there and the gas and do all of these other things. And after a while, I started to realize that it was maybe not the best deal, but in the beginning, it seemed like $30 for an hour of my time was amazing. And I had worked in restaurants for many years, and, maybe you're making $20 tip. That would be the best tip ever, right? I worked at a TGI Friday, so the checks were not that large. So I sort of was in this mindset of just like, I have to keep hustling, and my time is worth $30 an hour. And I remember when I started moving away from the fitness world, I realized that was not my deep passion, and that I actually just really loved building businesses and sort of the social media marketing and all of the content creation and the psychology of like helping people transform. That was what was exciting to me. And it was around 2014, 2015, when I had a friend reach out to me. We ran a law of attraction meetup group together. And she asked me, she said, I want you to be my business coach. And I said, okay. She's like, you're gonna be my social media coach. And I was like, no, I don't really do that. Like, I'm in network marketing. Like, you could join my team. She's like, no, I don't want to be in network marketing. I'm building my life coaching business, and I want you to coach me. What do you charge? And I said, I'll do it for free. She said, no. I'm going to pay you. Like, we're literally running a law of attraction meetup group. So she's like, there has to be an energetic exchange of money. Like, you're giving me your time. What do you charge? And I said, I don't know. She said, well, think about it and get back to me. And I remember I went into a Facebook group that was like a group coaching program that I was a part of at the time. And I posted in there and said, hey guys, so I have this person that wants to hire me. Do you think you should charge like $30 an hour for business coaching? And people were like, what the hell? No, what are you talking about? $30. They were like, you need to charge a minimum of $100 an hour. Like, nobody's talking about packages or anything. And I was like, oh, $100 an hour? Like, that scared the bejesus out of me. So I went back to my friend Helen and I said, Helen, I charge $100 an hour. And I don't think she was expecting that. I don't think she was, she kind of set herself up for that, but she was ready to be in the up-leveled energy. She invited that in. And so that was my first business coaching client. And we would meet up at, Starbucks and sit down together, and we would, design her content and map out some packages and things like that, whatever she needed help with. And so that was a huge shift for me. And I remember one day after we were at Starbucks doing some coaching, I went home and I was supposed to have a call with somebody who was on my network marketing team. And working with Helen, she was like showing up and we were getting great results and she was signing clients and it was amazing. And then I go home and I was supposed to get on the call with somebody who wasn't paying me, and she didn't do whatever the thing she was supposed to do from and I said, great, well, we're not going to get on the call then. And you can let me know when you've completed those steps. And she still has not. completed them to this day. Right. Like literally like 7 years later, or whatever. So, that was like a huge line in the sand for me, where I realized that I was so done with dragging people, and I had been indoctrinated in the network marketing space into this belief system that like there was somehow something wrong with me as a leader if I wasn't getting people to do the work, which is so freaking backwards. And I think messes with a lot of people in that space. It messes with their head a little bit, and they start doubting themselves, when in reality, like I have no interest in convincing anybody to be an entrepreneur who's not meant to have their own business. And so when I actually got to step into the space of working with people who wanted to show up for the work and were interested in getting my help and excited about having these conversations, I feel like that was a huge energetic shift in the way that I was showing up in my work and my business.
I love that. And I always feel bad because I'm always like, throwing shade over at my friends at Beachbody, but not real shade in terms of like, they're bad people or anything. But I think, what happens too in that space, and oftentimes in the network marketing space, is that people who are not meant to run business, or who don't care about the biomechanics of movement and fit, and like, don't recognize or understand the type of responsibility they have when they're working with people, they're kind of not forced, but highly persuaded to move into that type of position, so that's powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. So, how and what are some of the big shifts that you made and helped other people make when it came to, deciding their price on their offer?
Yeah. So I'll kind of start with my own like offer kind of journey. I remember like I was maybe doing business coaching for a couple of months, and I was getting people amazing results, and I decided to really, really up level. So I put together a $3,000 package, and I gave myself, I think, 30 days to make that, to make my first sale. And it was crazy how things just started to manifest, because I made a decision that I was going to be stepping into that energy, that I was going to step into the energy, being the coach that could create that type of an experience. And I remember the day that I signed that first client, and I went for a walk, and I kept noticing this thought popping in my head: you got to make money, you got to make money. And I was like, what? No, I'm good. We're good. We just made $3,000. Like, we're good for right now. And then again, I'm walking, and the thought pops in my head. And I had never been consciously aware of how constant that thought was just playing on repeat in my head. And then all of a sudden, because it no longer resonated with my 3D reality, all of a sudden it kind of fell away, and those neural pathways broke down, and that thought was gone. But it was really fascinating to be sort of this observer of my own thought, that something that had obviously been there for some time, but I hadn't recognized. And some people in the, manifestation or, subconscious mind space, it's like, oh, like they get freaked out if they have a single negative thought. Yes, I wanted to share that, because while I had that thought playing in the background, I was also doing such intentional, conscious work around my money mindset, around reprogramming new beliefs. And so, while I hadn't maybe released some of the old ones, I was doing such an intentional job of creating new ones that it sort of worked itself out. But one thing that I love to talk about now when it comes to creating packages and like how to really approach that is, I have so many clients that will come to me and say, what should I charge? And I will never tell somebody what they should charge, because it is such a personal thing. And I would never want to rob somebody of the ability and the opportunity for them to step into owning that number coming through for them without any outside, whatever. So one little quick exercise that I take people through that I think is really powerful is, there maybe, let's say like, oh, I want to create this one-on-one package. Okay, great. They're like, what should I charge? I'm like, okay, what is the absolute minimum that you would feel comfortable charging? So let's say the person's like, ooh, okay, $500. I'm like, okay. It's like, and what is the absolute maximum that you would feel comfortable charging? And people are like, $5,000. Okay. So then we can like literally go through and I just have people like, I'll say numbers in between those 500 and 5,000 and have them do like a full body check of like, how does that feel in your heart? How does that feel in your gut? How are you breathing as I say those numbers? And so that you can get really intuitively aligned. And what's so funny about doing it this way is when people originally say the minimum number, before I ask them that question, they'll be like, I'm thinking about charging like maybe $700 for my thing, or maybe 1,000. And then I'm like, okay, what's your absolute minimum? And like, 1,000 or 500 or whatever. It's like so usually so close to the minimum that they want to charge.
Mm-hmm.
And so they start to realize that there's actually a higher energetic possibility that they could step into. Now, what tends to come up when people say, okay, I see and can feel into the $5,000 one-on-one package and I can feel the possibility of that, but like, I don't know. Then all the fear and doubt comes in. They're like, what? I don't think I could do that. Am I really good enough? What would I even give them for $5,000? Like, and then they start going in their heads of like, I'm gonna have to over deliver. I'm gonna have to do all this stuff for them. And so I was having this conversation with one of my friends, Stephanie, the other day. She was saying that she wants to work with like 7-figure people, but she wanted to charge like $1,000 or something. And I said, and she's like, well, other people who do what I do in this space, like they charge like 400, 500. So how could I be somebody coming in charging like thousands upon thousands of dollars? And I said, well, instead of asking, can I charge people $10,000? Will people pay for that? I said, I want you to think about this instead. Ask, what would it look like to create a $10,000 experience? And that question completely shifted everything for her. And all of a sudden, the conversation changed from who am I to charge that to, oh my gosh, well, if I did a 10K experience, I could bring in a private chef and I could have this like really cool villa for them. And we could have live music for the experience. And we could do this and this and this. And like all of a sudden she was creating and I'm like, well, shit, I want to go to that. That sounds amazing. Like nobody's doing that because nobody's thinking about their pricing model through the lens of what type of an experience do I want to create for my customer, for my client. And I think that's such an empowering way to start thinking about what your current offers look like and what your next offers look like.
I think too, as someone who's gone through that, similar conversation, because as a master marketer, I'm always considering the other side because there's, two sides to every story, right? So I know I've said to you before, no one's going to pay $1,000 for a dessert, or a Butterfinger. But then we started thinking about it and we're both in New York and we're like, well, wait a second. There's that Serendipity restaurant that has $1,000 ice cream on there and people travel all over the world to eat that dessert. Well, they did pre the blip. They did. But so there's evidence of that transaction, whatever transaction that is for you, there's evidence of it everywhere. You just have to be open to looking for it. But I'm curious as someone, or not, but rather, but as someone who's just gone through this, right, is that there comes a moment where you up level and you're like, all right, I'm going to double my price and I'm going to do it. But then there also, if we haven't done the work to show up at that rate, then we start to do things like, try and rob our clients of experiences, or we start to, over deliver. And I'm using that in quotations because you think, oh no, if I don't do all of that, then I'm not going to be worth it. So how do you acknowledge it, recognize that behavior and shift it?
This is such a good question. So I know there are a lot of coaches out there that encourage their clients to increase their prices like every quarter. And I just think that's weird advice because it doesn't really, or it's just generic advice because it doesn't really take into account the individual's experience with their clients, their alignment with their pricing. And it's just, while yes, money is energy. So like, is there a misalignment energetically or not? So I think it is, like you said, there is a piece to this where it is essential to, as you are increasing your prices, do an assessment, see, does this feel good to me? is this aligned for the clients that I want to work with? Because I think one thing people will come up against is they have clients and maybe they're charging. One of my friends, she had been a massage therapist. She told me this story, and she was charging $60. This was years ago before she had an online business. And she was so nervous to increase her prices. So she only increased them from $60 to $65. And she had been working with some of these people for 5 years and never increased her prices. And like, that doesn't even account for inflation. So when she told people we're increasing to 65, like 90% of her clients had absolutely no problem with it. And there was like 1 or 2 people that were like, that's just going to be too much. Like me and my husband come together and like, we can't afford the extra $10. She was like, okay. Like, and you know, for her, I think that was like a moment of, well, screw you, because I barely increased it and I should have doubled it. Like $60. I don't know where you find a $60 massage. That we don't have that in New York, really. So it's just really funny, right? Like there's always going to be people who resonate with your prices, and there's always going to be people who don't. Like there are some people who I worked with who, you know, are not in an energetic place to sign up for some of my offers. And then there are other people who are like, oh my God, I would have paid triple for this. So it's all a matter of perspective. And so if we are listening to what other people are saying about what we should and shouldn't charge, we are essentially buying into their money limitations. Mm-hmm. Instead of empowering ourselves to create something that is in energetic alignment. And like, if somebody's on a call with you, that's like another piece too, right? Where especially when somebody increases their prices, there's that big fear of, how do I address this with my clients and tell them that I'm increasing my prices? How do I, introduce that conversation? Or what if I get on a call and somebody thinks my prices are too expensive? This happened to me. This was maybe my 3rd discovery call when I started. I think my package was like $3,000 or something. And I remember I got on the phone with this woman, and she asked me if I could give her the payment plan, but without any interest. And she said, just like think about it and let me know. And I said, I actually don't need to think about it. The answer is no. And let me tell you why. And I basically broke it down for her. And I said, for a couple of reasons. I said, if I were to give you essentially a discount right out the gate, I would be communicating several things to you. One, that I don't stand in my power as a coach, and that would really throw off the entire energetic relationship of our entire coaching experience together. 2, I would be modeling what I would consider to be bad behavior, to you, to do that on a coaching call. And I always practice what I preach. So I'm not going to teach you something and do something different. I said 3, I would basically be communicating to you that I don't believe I could help you get an ROI. And therefore I'm going to lower my prices to accommodate you, like that's not how I work. I was like, and overall, it's just not how I'm going to show up to do business. And I maybe said a couple other things, and she was like, wow, okay, that actually makes a lot of sense. She didn't end up signing up then. She did, however, a couple months later, end up signing up for my $2,000 coaching program, my group coaching program. And then about 6 months after that, she signed up with me for one-on-one at my increased price point after I'd worked with, a couple hundred people. And I remember getting on the phone with her, like that first call, and she said, I just have to address this. I am so mortified that our very first call, I tried to like talk you down on price. She's like, I just didn't know what I didn't know. She said, I didn't realize how much of a beginner I was, and that like how much, like she just thought it was going to be easier to take her through a few steps and then she'll like make money. And she was like, I didn't realize there was so much I didn't know that I didn't know, and that I was literally starting from zero. And she didn't understand the value and the possibilities that were available to her with actually getting that support. So I share that with you guys because hopefully you realize that just because somebody maybe doesn't get your pricing, especially somebody who's not in the coaching world, they're not, in this space, they don't understand like the certifications that you've been through, the training that you've been through, the, level of care that you put into what you're doing. Like people pay attention when they pay. That's just like, one of those little catchphrases, but it's true. Like when people put down money, they have skin in the game. And I think we had I had this conversation with somebody, even with like, I have a high level mastermind that's a high ticket offer. And I said, if it was like a $300 mastermind, like, would you have even been interested in signing up? And everyone was like, well, no. I'm like, okay, but no, but why? Like, because you would assume that it's not a high caliber person joining. You would assume that we're doing very introductory, basic beginner work, and on and on and on. So, there is this perceived value around money that I don't know that people fully acknowledge. Like, if you go to the store and you see two TVs that are exactly the same, or maybe you don't realize they're exactly the same, one's 300 and one's 600, what's your initial assumption? That the $600 one has more bells and whistles, it's a better quality, nicer TV, right? Like, the $300 one could just be on it, like, just discounted accidentally, right? But we have these preconceived notions about the quality and value of something based on its price. And so while there are some people who are able or interested in creating a business model that's, a little bit more accessible, which is a beautiful thing, right? That's like sort of this Walmart model of pricing things, making everything accessible. Like, there's also the people who are going to be like the luxury, the Nordstrom, and there's no right or wrong. There's no better or worse. It's just about what feels really good for you, and what feels good for you today can change tomorrow. And you like permission to evolve and change your mind and create offers that solve different problems for different people at different levels in their journey.
I love that. So there's two things, right? Because I feel like it is a paradox in the sense that, like, when we just go to your TV model, for example, is that people will have a perceived, an unconscious, in my opinion, idea that like the $600 one might be of higher value, but also at the same time, we're looking for the best rate for the value that we can get, right? So it's an interesting nuanced conversation, I feel like, to navigate when you're determining your own prices. Because you, on an energetic level, since we also are talking about energy, and we do talk about this inside of that awesome mastermind that she's talking about, and I can speak to that because I'm in that mastermind, right? So it's that there needs to also be an energetic match. Nobody wants to have that $10,000 experience in a $27 offer. They might think that they do, but not really.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so it's very, because sometimes people will try, myself included, I'm guilty of this, like cram everything that they can, which will just lead to overwhelm. And oftentimes overwhelm will lead to inaction. And if people don't take action, they're not going to get results.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an interesting conversation to have when you're determining your value or determining the value of the offer, especially too, because people don't really fully understand how valuable their services are, because what's unconsciously easy to you is not for your client.
So true. I think too, to kind of go back to the TV example, that's a good like base example, but when we're talking about coaching, it's a little bit different, right? Like, that was a good example for that purpose, but for like the bigger picture of coaching and mentoring, anything that's education based, like a TV, or like you go to a store, it's like you eat a piece of steak, it's $40, steak is gone. There's no ROI on that steak. Like, you have the memory and the experience, that's it. But for coaching, it's like, that's why people invest that tens of thousands of dollars into continuing education in college and universities and certifications, because they understand, or they see it through that lens of, that this is going to be something that's going to advance me through like ongoing. So I think an interesting example other than the TV is to look at it through the lens of like engagement rings, which we're all a marketing campaign. A diamond is forever, right? Genius marketing campaign. But even talking to my fiance, like when we watched, I think it was on Netflix, like the history of diamonds or something like that. They have like a whole series of different things. And like a diamond is created by pressure. And so today they have diamonds that are basically man-made, where they have machines that pressurize things. And people don't want to buy those diamonds. They want the quote unquote real diamonds. So it's like, when we talk about like perceived value, I think that's an interesting example of like, there's this identity attached to having something be a certain price point, or have a certain like designer label, or be a certain like whatever. So there's, interestingly enough, I do think that there are circles of the coaching space where that actually is also the case, where there is an element of the way in which a coaching program certification is branded, and therefore because of the identity level of that the branding and the messaging is speaking to the identity level of the person, that they then want to be a part of that so that they can, you know, walk around with Gucci essentially on the Gucci of coaching on their you know, billboard for their business.
Yeah, oh my gosh, it's so true. It's so, I'm laughing at that diamond example because literally my husband had considered getting one of those diamonds. And I was like, no. And it's too, because I lost my diamond. I lost my engagement ring. Oh my gosh, you know.
Right? Like that's a perfect example. Like, why did you not want a diamond? It's actually a diamond, right? It's the act, like if you looked at it under the microscope, it's exactly the same.
Mhm.
But there's something about maybe it's like, oh, having something that's billions of years old that, you know, a diamond is forever, but can like only be cut by itself, right? Like, I don't know. I have no idea why or how, but prior to that marketing campaign, people had all sorts of types of engagement rings. There, you know, some of them had gemstones, but some of them didn't. And that was like not a thing until, you know.
Yeah, because you also hear, I think we've also been indoctrinated to believe that if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I feel like people will carry that. Right. And I've said this too before, is no one, if you're right outside the grocery store trying to sell filet mignon outside of the package in a truck outside the grocery store, people are going to go into the grocery store,
100%.
even though you're cheaper. And I'm saying cheaper in quotations.
Yeah.
And then too, the other thing too that we're not talking about, which is important to remember, is that money is subjective in terms of what is expensive to us. Like, how do you know that? Expensive compared to what, right? Like $27 might be somebody's last few dollars in their savings account or discretionary income, or maybe someone's going to go and get a second job so that they can pay for personal training, which has happened when I was working at Crunch, right? So it's not for us or for you to decide what is expensive and what is not.
Yeah, and that really speaks to, you know, honestly, like where you live.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you and I both live in New York, and running a business is way more expensive. We pay tons more in taxes than the rest of the United States. You know, like there's a different cost of living here. And so, you know, what we might require to live a certain lifestyle in New York is going to be super different if you live somewhere in the South or the Midwest. Like the cost of living is different. And, you know, when I was in a mastermind, that was something that came up quite a bit, where, you know, so many people are on that trajectory of like, I need to make more money and more money and more money. And we all kind of stopped when we were having a deep convo. We were like, yeah, but why? Like, why? Do you actually need it? Is your business like struggling? Like, are you running a profitable business? Okay, so then like, where's that extra money going? And if you're going to be adding more revenue, like, does that mean bringing in another team member? Does that mean doing this and that? Like, are you basically going to break the whole model that's got you literally working 2 hours a day in, you know, crazy, amazing profit? Like, why do you need more? Right. So that was a big question. And looking at the profit of the business and looking at, you know, the lifestyle that you want to live, that there were some people who, yeah, were like, I would like to be at 2 million or 3 million in revenue because these are my expenses and these are the things for where I live and for my family and my personal values of what I want to create and how I want to invest my money and what I want to do with the big vision of my business. And then there were other people who were like, I just want to hang out at home and make sourdough bread every single day. Like,
Love.
you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. That was what I meant when we first started, is that success is not, it's different. We all get to decide what our level of success actually looks like. Like for me, I think of, you know, I'm going to be in exercise clothes all day, every day. It doesn't matter to me how much money I'm making, but I will take all my revenue and travel the world and I'll go work on Turks and Caicos. Like I want to travel. I want to have that type of freedom and live that my luxury through my experiences. Well, some people want to have the Gucci bag or they want to wear, a Neiman Marcus t-shirt.
Mm-hmm.
It's totally fine. We just get to decide that for ourselves.
100%. Yeah, I actually had a really interesting conversation with a couple of my friends. They were like, we were together and they wanted to go to all the like designer places. And I was like the most bored. I'm like, these are not even nice bags. Like, I don't get it, you guys. I was like, I'm really confused. Like, why do you guys like these bags? And they're like, well, like they're like investment pieces. And I was like, okay. I was like, well, that makes a little bit of sense. So, like, you could buy it for 5,000 and then in like 3 years, it's either you sell it back for 5,000. I'm like, well, then that's not an investment piece. That just, I guess, doesn't depreciate. But I was like, whatever. Anyway, we're having this whole conversation and I was like, when did you guys decide? Like, I just thought that was interesting from an identity perspective. I was like, when did you guys decide that you wanted to have a Chanel bag? And they all had different stories originating from like childhood around like, oh, well, like the cool people had these bags, or like, oh, like I never had this. So like, I really wanted this, or like, oh, my mom always had these bags. And like, this was like something we would go and do together. And I was like, oh, okay. Cause I'm like, for me, that was never something that was important to me. That was not anything that any of my friends ever had. And I live in New York City. So I'm like, I don't want a big like Chanel bag. Like, I'm like, I need a fanny pack. I was like, like, that is my life. I'm like literally walking around with this fanny pack that I got in Italy that's so cute, but it's kind of falling apart. And they're like, Jen, it's time for a new bag. And I'm like, no, it's so practical and useful. And I have my Metro card in the front zipper. I don't have to like mess around with anything and like try to dig through something. Like, I need fast, I need efficient, I need convenient, I need something that's not pulling on my shoulders. But like, so for me, that fits my lifestyle, my personal values, my personal needs. And for them, they're driving around in a car in Miami or LA. So like, yeah, having a nice bag, they're going out to fancy dinners and, their bag sitting next to them in the car. For me, I'm like, like, I don't want to put a $5,000 bag on the subway. Like that just doesn't make sense to me. But right, it's so identity driven in the way that we define like, what is success for you and what do you want that to look like? And there is absolutely no right or wrong, but it is also interesting to begin to challenge some of the things that you believe that you want. So I'm using the bag example, but hopefully you guys see this is a much bigger picture conversation. Because even when I was in network marketing, it was like, oh, you should want these things. You should want to hit this rank. You should want to be doing this every month. And I remember stepping back at one point and realizing that I had climbed a mountain that I had no interest in climbing, simply because I was indoctrinated into these beliefs and told every day on these, podcasts that they were doing, like, this is what you want to get to. This is what you want to do. It was like, okay, zombie, like, this is what I want to get to, right? All that's it was like dripping into my subconscious. But it was also because I hadn't really personally taken the time to revisit my new goals. And so I just sort of fell into what I saw other people doing and said, all right, I guess I'll give that a shot. So while, especially in the online space and the coaching bubbles and fitness bubbles, like there are certain benchmarks that somehow have been created similar to what was in network marketing, like, oh, the 10K month or the 6-figure business, right? There's these like certain benchmarks. It's like, but do you actually want that?
Mm-hmm.
Like, is that actually what you want to create? People like, booked out client roster. Okay, but do you actually want to be on client calls all day? Is that something that aligns with your personal values? Like, people get all excited about that. And like, I see people on Instagram being like, oh, love my schedule. And they have like 8 calls. And I'm like, frig that, man. Like, I mean, I've done that in the past, right? But then I'm like, hell no, I am not doing that again. I cannot sit in front of the computer for that long. My eyeballs will just.
Well, and people forget to the energy exchange. It's not just an hour. I mean, when I have more than 4 calls in a day, I'm like, want to go to bed at 7 p.m. And my husband's like, what's wrong with you? And I'm like, well, I just did calls all these days, all day. And he's like, you did 4. And I was like, yeah, but you don't understand. It's like I'm not just showing up and standing there waiting, I'm pouring into people. That is a different energetic exchange, Okay, so I am curious though on your perspective, because I'm, you hear people talk about, especially too, like even outside of fitness industry, any industry or coaching industry, is you hear people talking about, supply and demand and market, right? You need to be in the market. Like, what's the good market rate, right? And I feel like I've heard one or two it's a nuanced conversation. I'll hear someone say there's someone at every price point. And then you'll also hear people say like, okay, well, maybe it's not the right offer. Or maybe we're overextended. Like, how can you tell? And how do you determine? How do you decide? How do you navigate that for yourself and your clients?
Ooh, that is a very nuanced conversation. And I think requires like, so anything that I say right now for anybody listening, like these are just thoughts and ideas. These are not specific to your business because I don't have the context of your business. So, I feel like sometimes people hear those conversations like, oh, okay, I should do this with my money. It's like, oh, well, or my pricing. It's nuanced and it really, really depends on where you are at. So you kind of asked a few things there. It's like, how do you know if it's the right pricing? So I think the first piece is like, I definitely can look at any industry and say, okay, there's definitely something at every price point. Like Tony Robbins, whenever people are like, am I charging too much? I'm like, listen, Tony Robbins charges $1 million for a year of coaching. He has a 2-year wait list, and he also takes 10% of your business revenue increases. So like, if that's the high end of the spectrum, and then other people are doing coaching for free, like, where do you want to find yourself in the middle? And I think too, one of the big things with figuring out where to place yourself in the market, I think it's a lot of like the messaging work that you really help people with around really refining like how they uniquely solve a problem, really positioning their methodology as something unique and fresh, their teaching style and how they're going to bring something new to the conversation. And then really like what we were just talking about around identity, that, really creating an excitement, because you can look at, especially in the fitness industry, there's so many people who are offering online workouts, especially this last year. So why is it that the Tone It Up girls, I mean, they obviously started a few years ago, but still, like, they specifically exploded off of YouTube? And it was because they had a really clear identity that they created for their community, and the community exploded, and they had hashtags, and they were like rosé, and they all wore pastels, and it was all about these beach vibes. And there was something that the mom sitting at home in the Midwest, who, she's like, I just had a baby, I don't feel like myself anymore. Wow, look at these cool young girls. Like, I would want to be friends with them. I want to be a part of this community so that I can step into that identity myself. And I think that's one piece where a lot of marketers, they focus so heavily, and especially in the fitness space, on the science of what they've learned of, we were talking the other day about like the biomechanics and like all of these, like, they almost get, especially like when I used to coach like dietitians and fitness people, like they would get into a space where their content would almost be over their avatar's head. So they would just be like teaching as if it was from, in their content, as if it was from a textbook. And while they were doing a beautiful job educating, their content was almost speaking to other dietitians, other people at that level of the conversation, and they weren't really creating, they weren't incorporating these marketing fundamentals and these messaging fundamentals of really bringing their ideal client into the conversation and showing them who they would become if they stepped into making these changes, like who they were going to be, not just what they were going to have or what they were going to look like, who they were going to become after they moved through that transformation.
And I did say it earlier too, as part of what prompted the conversation or the question, was just that when we're in it and when we're doing this, when we're trying to teach something that's close to us or easy to us, it is hard for us to see the other perspective in terms of your client's perspective. And it's hard to determine, because one of the things people don't like to talk about, but it's so important, which is the cost and the consequence of not getting started and the consequence of not prioritizing your health. And for us, it's easy to say, well, that's just easy. You just work out. and just eat right. Right. But I live with someone who really battles with it, and I get to see that other perspective every day. And I feel like so many of us are just stuck in our context boxes that it's hard for us to look outside what we're really serving, because to us we think, oh, it's not valuable, but to them you're saving them thousands of dollars and misery.
Yeah.
Right? We're talking about luxury and what's success. For me, eating that steak and having that experience and have those memories is huge. I live in New York. I've spent laugh. We've put seamless web through kids through college. I didn't have anything that's like tangible from it, but it was worth it to me, and I would spend it again because I have that memory of the experience.
Yeah.
Okay. So I want to be mindful of your time, but I'm going to ask you a big question so you can, and I'll leave this one to be the last one. But as someone who has built $1 million business and has worked and been around multiple millions and people who are at the beginning, people at the 6-figure mark, whatever, what are some of the biggest differences in money mindset that you have noticed at every level?
When I was at a Tony Robbins event, I was sitting down with my friend, Catherine Zinkina, who runs Manifestation Babe. Some of you guys might follow her. And I looked at her and I was like, can I ask you something? She said, yeah, what's up? I said, what are your beliefs about success? And she was like, oh my God, that's a really good question. Like, do you just like ask people that? And I'm like, yeah, sometimes. She basically just listed off a bunch, and it was just like, my success is inevitable. And it's like, it's interesting because I have a group of girlfriends who all have, very multiple 6, 7, multiple 7-figure businesses, and spending time with them versus like spending time with like people at home. I will say when I'm spending time with them, it's little things, like we'll go out to eat and it's like, oh, should I get this or that? And they're like, we live in an and universe, like get both, it's abundant. And you're like, oh yeah, I could like have the pancakes and the eggs. But it's simple shit like that where it's so subtle, and you're just like, wow, yeah, I can live in the and. I can live in the and energy, and that is very, very abundant. They also like take time to really like they believe and highly value in investing in themselves. They believe in and highly value dressing themselves in a way that feels very abundant and loving. That doesn't mean necessarily like buying a designer item. It's just like when you put your clothes on in the morning, do you feel like great? Do you look in the mirror and go, wow, I'm empowered and ready to go today? They take that time. And someone might be listening to this and going, okay, well, yeah, but they're 6 and 7-figure entrepreneurs. So like, yeah, they do that. But they did that back then too, because many of them I've known when we were all not making money. And that was how we all met, being at like Tony Robbins events together, all stumbling through, trying to figure it out together alongside each other, and have grown alongside each other. And in the beginning, it was always about, okay, if I want to, let's say, go to an event or have an experience, it wasn't like, oh, I can't afford that. It was like, what do I need to do to make that happen? And that could be selling something. That could be, picking up a bar shift, whatever it was. I would say all of them have a mindset of, I trust myself. I trust in my vision, even when we didn't fully trust ourselves and we were just like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like there was still that like inner vision driving us that we just allowed to lead us. And then over time made these small incremental changes, these small decisions that moved us closer and closer to our goals. And so on some subconscious level, there's like a connection. I would say all of them are pretty spiritual and, have this belief that, my success is inevitable. That's a really big one. And like money is abundant and there's more than enough. And, that it's all available to us, that we can create whatever we want. So,
I'll say for me, as someone who's also been, in the trenches and going through these shifts incrementally. I'll say that my experience has been, when I stopped, because it's always about letting go, not always, but often about letting go, is when I stopped arguing for my limitations. Like instead of arguing for the yeah buts or life is happening, you see those cliches like life is happening for me, not to me. But then we don't recognize, we don't notice in our language what we're saying. Yeah, but that's not possible for me. Yeah, but that's only true for blah, blah, blah. And once you can start acknowledging that and letting go of that, you'll up level.
Yep. I will say one of the other things that I think is really big is, especially in that group of girls, they're all willing to ask for support. It's not always easy. It's not always natural, or like comfortable rather, but we've all gotten so much freaking better over the years about being vulnerable around each other and going like, I want to burn my business to the ground today and I'm freaking out. And like, I just had this massive spiritual up level and like nothing in my business feels aligned today. And like, what the hell do I do? I'm kind of freaking out. Like those are very normal conversations. And I think people, or at least we all did in the early days, assumed that like those things wouldn't happen as we like achieved certain tiers of success. And those conversations still happen. Those like, weren't we just talking about that the other day?
I've said it before, is that I actually created and did everything I said that I wanted to do, and I hate it. I don't really, clients. I love you. That's not what I'm saying. No, but like every time you get it's along those lines of the same thing of like every time, your clients are like, I'll be happy when I can fit into my favorite jeans again, I'll be happy. And then all of a sudden you do, and you're like, nah. So it's this letdown of, oh my gosh, I have dedicated my life in misery to achieving this. And then when I get there, nothing happened. Nothing's different.
Yes. So I remember when I had my first 6-figure launch in 2016, my friend Lauren was like right there alongside with me. Like she was trying to figure out how to get her stuff profitable. And I remember she called me and she was like, can I ask you something? Do you feel any different? And it really took me back for a moment, and I had to pause, and I was like, I actually don't. And that was such a moment of letdown. I don't know what I thought was going to happen, but I had put this idea of the 6-figure launch, I'm putting in quotation marks, like on this pedestal that like, when I hit this, like, then I'm going to feel worthy. Then I'm going to feel successful. Then I'm going to feel like I'm good enough. Like all of these things that I thought were going to be a catalyst from achieving a certain revenue. And in actuality, I hit that. And then it was like, oh crap, like now I have to fulfill on this. Now, like all of these people gave me $2,000, like we made almost like $115,000. Like, holy crap. Like now we actually have to like help them. Like, oh my God. And like, because I was like still in my process, there was like a lot of overwhelm because like that success happened very quickly, which I'm very grateful for, and gave me the opportunity to really step into an identity that I was ready for. And that, it all worked out exactly as it was supposed to. But I think a lot of times people are like, oh, I want the 6-figure business now. I want the blah, blah, blah. Now I want the big team now. And it's like, okay, but if you had that now, like, would you be able to emotionally handle the roller coaster of the stakes being even higher? Like when there's more to lose, right? There's more to gain, but there's also more to lose. Like it can be something that shakes you a little bit if you haven't done the inner work to, work on healing any past traumas and really working on nervous system regulation and being able to, and having those tools to navigate the roller coaster that is often entrepreneurship.
Yes, so true. It's so true. This is why, I'm always like I've said it. We've heard it from our mentors too, where they are like, you're going to get your lessons or your success, and nothing that is given to you can't handle. So no matter what's happening, nothing is going to happen to you that you can't handle. And when you live by that, it just changes the game for you. Right? No, then you don't have to be afraid of the trolls and the haters that are coming.
100%.
Yeah, for sure.
One of the things
I want to
a little bit. I'll just share really quickly. One of the things that no matter where you are right now in your business, if you're listening to this, start documenting everything that you're doing. Even if you're like, yeah, but guys, I haven't even made my first dollar. Great. I want you to document that. The fact that I have a screenshot from 2011 showing that I made $0 for the first 5 months. Yeah, that felt like absolute garbage when I was in those first 5 months. But now looking back, I can just kind of smile at that and reflect at how far I've come. And I'm able to like use that in my content and talk about that on stage. And I have the screenshot. So I really wish that I took more pictures of things throughout the like lows, because those are going to be things that are, like you were saying, you either get what you want or you get your lesson. Like those are going to be the lessons that you not only get, but ones that you're going to be able to teach and share with other people as you move forward. And so for me, I sort of was able to reframe that thought when things wouldn't go the way that I wanted to. It was like, okay, well, this sucks, but I'm going to be able to tell this story on stage one day. So let me take as many pictures as possible. Like, let me video this and let me, and I wish I did more of that earlier on.
That's such great insight. I love that. I love that. And it also helps you, keep your perspective. How you feel is really important that you process that, but it's, perspective can go a long way too. Like I know for me, when I get to every time I get to that next level, Jen said, why do you keep pushing the goalpost out without celebrating? Right? It's not that pushing the goalpost is bad, but it's like, okay, I hit that, but that didn't really matter. Let's do something else. Right. And if you miss that step, you're going to keep getting those lessons that you over and over and over. Oh, okay. So I want to be mindful of your time. Honestly, I could talk to you all day long. So thank you so much for hanging out with me today. So for those of you who want to hang out with Jen and learn more about her, where can I send them?
You guys can find me literally anywhere at Hey Jen Casey. That's site, handles, all the places, and the CEO Psyche podcast.
Cool. All right. We'll link all of that up in the show notes.
Yay. This is so fun. Thank you so much for having me.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks so much for hanging out with us today. Please be sure, if you haven't already, tap that bell to be notified when the next video comes out. Hit subscribe and be sure to leave me in the comments your biggest takeaway, and I'll catch you in the next video.